Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Jane Hemstridge, the President of the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute Board. I began this role in mid-2019, taking over from our retiring President, Chris Thomas, and at that time, I thought having a new president would be the biggest change you'd see at this year's AGM. But here we are, in our first virtual annual general meeting of the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute of Medical Research. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us. I begin this meeting by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which I stand today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present and to elders from other communities who may also be with us today. I also acknowledge that our audience is located across lands traditionally owned by many separate peoples. While I can't see you all, I'm thrilled that you're all able to join us today. As always, it's a pleasure to welcome our Institute members to our AGM, and for our new members, I hope to meet you in person soon. I'd also like to welcome my fellow board members, our Institute donors, alumni, bequesters and consumer buddies, and our scientists, students and professional services staff. In these extraordinary times, I hope that you're all well. I want to give a particularly warm welcome to those of you for whom this is your first AGM. While we miss having an in-person audience, we're pleased that our virtual meeting may mean that some people are able to participate who would not otherwise have been able to come in person. And we have some special guests online, I believe. Sir Gus Nossel, the Institute's patron, Professor Jacques Miller, the 2019 Lasker Prize winner, and Chris Thomas, our immediate past president. I'd like to formally extend my thanks to Chris, who retired as our board president last year after 20 years of service on the Institute's board. I served with Chris on the board since 2013, and I can honestly say that it was a real pleasure to work with him. Chris brought a range of professional and personal skills to the role and just did a splendid job over his time as president. He oversaw many substantial changes at the Institute and was a huge contributor to the success of many projects, particularly for those more recent initiatives when he was president. And I'd like to wish Chris, his wife Cheryl and their family my very best wishes and thanks. I'd also like to extend my warmest wishes and thanks to another long-serving board member who retired in mid-2019, Dr. Graham Mitchell. Graham was an alumnus of the Institute who subsequently applied his talents to a range of leadership and consultative roles in scientific research and the biotech fields. Graham brought a wealth of knowledge to the board and also contributed to many strategically important areas of the Institute, including commercialization of our research, which we saw yield such significant returns through the income we received from the partial sale of our royalties to the anti-cancer drug venetoclax. The board is a dynamic body, and last year we also welcomed a new board member in Pippa Connolly. Pippa has vast professional expertise in large projects, construction and engineering, and has been involved in other boards, including the Royal Melbourne Hospital. It's been wonderful to have Pippa bring her perspectives to our board, and I would also like to thank all my other board colleagues for their hard work since the last AGM. What a year 2019 was. It seems much longer than 5 months ago, with all the changes that Covid-19 has brought to our lives. But looking back, 2019 was a really important year at the Institute, both for research achievements as well as the strategic and infrastructure advantages that were made. 2019 was the first year of our new strategic plan, and one of the biggest changes for the Institute was the reorganisation into 5 research themes and a new divisional structure. And I'd like to thank all the staff and students who so capably adapted to this transition over 2019. Our director, Doug Hilton, will reflect in more depth on the many achievements that have come from the new scientific structure. Our strategic plan also highlighted how we can continue to build on our collaboration and innovation capabilities, and how we can enhance our vibrant and inclusive workplace and respond to the changing times. In 2019, our philanthropic supporters were vital partners in the Institute's research, providing our amazing scientists with the backing they need to do their work and enabling investment in the technology that is advancing research at exponential rates. Thank you one and all for your tremendous generosity. This year marks 5 years since the Institute launched its centenary campaign. This programme matched the philanthropic interests of donors with brilliant scientists across the Institute, providing much-needed support for early career researchers. This support enabled them to focus on their work in the lab with less pressure to go and locate scarce funds. And on a personal note, as one of the centenary donors, it's just been lovely to see the progress that Dr. Belinda Lee has made in pancreatic cancer research in Tracy Potosky's lab. I'd like to extend my thanks to all of the centenary donors who have made a monumental investment to the Institute's future. Your contribution, amounting to more than $46 million, have invested in the careers of 26 early career researchers, providing them with the financial support and the backing to be able to advance a wide range of vitally important areas of research. The impact of your support will be long-lasting as those young scientists go on to make new discoveries that advance human health. Also, a huge thank to the actual Centenary Fellows for all the hard work that you have put into your research and your commitment and passion. It's wonderful and inspiring to see how you've all come along and to learn about the discoveries that you have made. Philanthropy has also enabled the establishment of an important new facility at the Institute, the Colonial Foundation for Healthy Ageing, which is a collaborative venture with the Royal Melbourne Hospital and supported by the Colonial Foundation. The centre is bringing together the latest technologies and experts to develop new tests for diseases of ageing, such as dementia, and is part of our new Healthy Development and Ageing research theme. In 2019, the National Drug Discovery Centre also began operations. This is a centre for discovering and developing new chemical compounds through to potential new medicines, a key step in the translation of lab research through to better health outcomes. This facility is the first of its kind at an academic research centre in Australia. It was made possible by funding from the Institute, in particular funds obtained from our partial sale of royalties in Venetoclax, along with vital support from the Australian and Victorian governments, as well as the generosity of philanthropists, in particular former Institute board member Mike Fitzpatrick and his wife Helen Sykes. In late 2019, researchers from around Australia participated in the first round of applications to access the National Drug Discovery Centre, and in March we were honoured to have our federal and state health ministers, Greg Hunt and Jenny Mikakos, announce the successful projects. The National Drug Discovery Centre is also benefiting our researchers here at the Institute and is one of the research capabilities that have rapidly been applied to Covid-19. Over the past few weeks, the robots in the centre have been searching night and day for new drug precursors that disrupt Covid-19. The National Drug Discovery Centre is an important new asset in our national research infrastructure, and I'm so proud to see how it can be applied to our community's most pressing problems. You'll be hearing more about our Covid-19 research tonight from our Director Doug Hilton, as well as directly from two of our Covid-19 researchers, Mark Pellegrini and Wai Hong Tam. Now, on to our annual report. While we can't give you a copy of the annual report in person this afternoon, you can access it online to learn more about us. You will also see that our annual report comes with a new virtual interactive display using your smartphone. And I hope you have as much fun using it and exploring some of the amazing images as I did. Now it gives me great pleasure to formally move that the annual report for the period ending 31 December 2019 be received and adopted. But before I do the vote, I'd like to call for any questions from Institute members in relation to the annual report. You can ask questions in writing via Slido, and they will be read out here for us to answer. I'll pause for a moment to let anyone enter their questions. Well, it seems we don't have any questions on the annual report, so I will now put the motion to Institute members to receive and adopt the annual report for the period ending 31 December 2019. Members, please place your votes via the polls tab on Slido, and I'll pause here for another moment to allow our members to vote. Okay. Thank you. I declare the resolution carried, and I will now hand over to our Treasurer, Rob Wiley, who will take you through the financial report for the year.
Thank you, Jane. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to present the Statement of Financial Position, the Statement of Profit and Loss and other comprehensive income, the Statement of Cash Flows, and the reports of the Directors and of the Auditor in respect of the 12 months ended 31 December 2019. With recent Covid-19 impacts occurring in early 2020, many of the economic impacts of the virus will be reflected in next year's financial statements and beyond for the Institute. As others have and will explain in further detail today, the Institute is currently responding to the impacts of this virus and is already making a significant research contribution to support our society through these challenging times. These financial statements include some information in Note 27 on page 27 about the impact on the Institute of Covid-19. In particular, the Institute's investment portfolio had experienced a reduction in its value of $59.3 million, or 10.9%, between the 31st of December 2019 and the 26th of March 2020. On the 26th of March, the portfolio was valued at $486.3 million. By comparison, at the 31st of December 2018, the investment portfolio was valued at $465.5 million. We're very conscious of the need to preserve our investment capital base at a time of such economic uncertainty. In March of 2020, over 41% of our investment portfolio was in defensive assets, such as cash and interest-bearing securities. In addition, the Institute holds significant cash reserves set aside for operating purposes. Acknowledging the challenging period we are presently experiencing, and which will likely be reflected in our financial presentation at our AGM next year, I would now like to present our financial results for the 12 months ended 31 December 2019. The net surplus for the financial year was $21.1 million, compared with the $11.3 million surplus for the 2018 year. The 2019 surplus included an additional net milestone receipt of $25.5 million relating to the venetoclax monetization. The Institute's total revenue for the year was $168.8 million, which included $82.3 million of operating revenue for research and a very pleasing 16.8 million in donations, of which 6.4 million was received for scientific equipment and capital works. 43% of the Institute's revenue was received from the state and federal governments, 20% was received from donations and other philanthropic sources, 18% was from investment revenues, with the remaining 19% from a range of other sources, including royalty-related income. 71% of the Institute's expenditure was scientific-related, 5% was infrastructure and building-related, and 12% was expenditure related to the delivery of the Institute's strategic initiatives. The remaining 12% being used to provide the professional services needed to support our scientists and the Institute's activities. I would like to acknowledge and thank those members of the financial community who graciously give their time to serve on the investment committee. Fiona Trafford-Walker, Andrew Scott, Steve Mulicek, and Stephen Milburn-Pyle. Thank you for helping us weather this current storm. I'd also like to acknowledge J.B. Weir and specifically Adam Blennerhassett and Curtis Reid. As chairman of the Audit and Risk Committee, I would also like to express my appreciation to my fellow board members of this important committee, which advises the board on its financial stewardship of the organization. The Institute's leadership group and the finance team should also be recognized for their efforts in providing sound financial management of the Institute's resources. Infrastructure funding is critical, and we are pleased to acknowledge the ongoing support of the Victorian and federal governments. The external audit performed by Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu progressed smoothly, and there are no matters of major concern. Our Deloitte partner, Annika Detroit, is here today and can answer any questions members may have on the audit. Members of the Institute, I now move that the statement of financial position, the statement of profit and loss and other comprehensive income, the statement of cash flows, the statement of changes in equity, and the reports of the directors and of the auditor for the financial period ended 31 December 2019 be received. Institute members, are there any questions relating to the financial reports? You may submit your questions via Slido. As there are no questions, I will now put the motion. Please cast your votes now. Votes can be submitted via the Polls tab on Slido. I declare the resolution carried. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll now hand over to Professor Doug Hilton, who will present his director's report.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Jane. This is my 12th AGM as director, and it really is the highlight of my year. I imagine it's a bit like a big game for an AFL player. I'm certainly nervous the night before. I tend to toss and turn. I have a routine for the big day. I wake up early, I make my usual strong black coffee, and then in the morning I write my speech. I dig out my suit, not my attire for most work days. I drive to Parkville and I prepare for the meeting, both this meeting and the board meeting that precedes it. I liaise with a wonderful technical and communications team. Thanks Colin, Cam and Eddie, who are scattered around the room here. I get my pep talk from our remarkable events manager, Jackie. And then my fabulous EAs, Kelly and Fenny, try to keep me calm. The board meeting that precedes the AGM is a bit like a pre-game briefing. an opportunity to focus and settle the nerves, and then I walk from the office through the tea room, from my office through the tea room, and I can hear the buzz of the crowd in the Davis Auditorium. I walk in and there are familiar faces, some die-hard bolted-on fans who have been supporting us for 50, 60, 70 years, and I'm not exaggerating. Some past players, legends of the game, from our team here at the Walter and Eliza Hall Institute, but from other teams as well. Researchers from the Ludwig Institute, the University of Melbourne, Royal Melbourne Hospital, Peter McCallum, much more friends and comrades than rivals. And then there's our current squad, scattered through the auditorium. Students, our new draft picks, the absolute future of the Institute. Research assistants, postdocs, lab heads and our senior research leaders, all seasoned players who bring their best game into the lab week in, week out, and our professional services staff who make everything possible. I look around and there are people that make me a better person and a better contributor, covering for my many weaknesses. Our Deputy Director, Alan Cowman, our theme leaders and division heads, our COO, Carolyn McDonald, and our leaders in professional services, and our Chief People Officer, Liz McMahon, and Chief Financial Officer, Joel Chibbett. They give me confidence. By the time I get on stage, my hands are clammy, and I can promise you, as usual, my hands are clammy, and my heart is racing. But, as you would all know, something is missing this year. I know how those AFL players must have felt walking into an empty stadium for round one in March this year. I can't see you and I can't hear you, but nevertheless, I welcome you. Our virtual supporters in one sense, but our very real supporters in another, whose warmth we can feel despite the social distance that separates us. This is an opportunity for our board, our staff and students, and for me to report back to the community that has entrusted us with funding via taxes and generous philanthropy. We take this responsibility seriously, and that responsibility comes and is a very palpable part of the trust that you place in us. It is normally an opportunity for our staff and students, me included, to meet you face to face and soak up your enthusiasm for the work we do. We can't do that this year, but I can't emphasise enough that knowing that you care about us and our work is a crucial ingredient in retaining our energy and passion through the months, years, and in some cases decades of hard work that it takes to crack a difficult research problem. 2019 was a fabulous year, as Jane Hemstrich mentioned. We reorganised the Institute into 5 overarching themes to reinforce the collaborative ethos that underpins everything we do, both in research and professional services, and which allows us to make the types of discoveries that excite other scientists around the world, that provides the critical mass to ensure we build a foundation of detailed and reliable knowledge, and then allows us to build upon those foundations to create improvements in disease prevention, diagnosis and treatment. Although 2019 feels like a distant memory, I want to share with you briefly 3 stories that, through your support, you helped write. As you will see, there's a common element to these discoveries. They're collaborations. They've been possible because of the diversity and inclusivity of our culture. They have come from transgenerational teams, and I'll mention a little more of that later. Transgenerational teams respectful of each other's differing talents and qualities. And you may think that I exaggerate the transgenerational nature of our workforce, but in the next few weeks, for example, we have some milestone birthdays. We have super talented undergraduate students like Harry McLeod who are celebrating their 20th birthday. And we have legends like my own supervisor and mentor, Nick Nicola, celebrating his 70th, and Jerry Adams celebrating his 80th birthday. It is so special to have people from 20 to 80 and everywhere in between working together. That happens in few workplaces, and we are fortunate to be part of such a special community. So, to the 3 stories of 2019, 3 scientific highlights, and I could have chosen another 30 to share with you, or 300 to share with you. The first is beautiful work by the laboratory of Jane Visvader and Jeff Lindemann, whose team has examined breast cancer not just one tumour type at a time, or one patient at a time, but one cell at a time, generating insights about how breast cancer begins and evolves. This was not a paper that involved one lab or one division. It required the expertise of scientists in our imaging facility and our mathematicians as well. It required long-term collaboration. Although it was only announced 2 weeks ago, I also want to share with you the absolutely tremendous news that Jane Visvader was elected by her peers to be a Fellow of the Royal Society. In many ways, this is the highest honour for a scientist, and Jane joins names like Sir Isaac Newton, Charles Darwin, Dorothy Hodgkin, Stephen Hawking, and Elizabeth Blackburn, along with many of our own researchers and board members, including my amazing Deputy Director, Alan Cowman, and Sir John Saville, who joined the board a little while ago. I want you to give Jane a wonderful round of applause. As I can't hear you, make it loud enough that it reaches Parkville. I'm sure Jane heard that. The second discovery I will highlight was again a team effort, led by John Silk and Najua Lalawi, and involving multiple labs and divisions here at WeHi, multiple institutions around Melbourne and further afield. They teased apart a crucial pathway involved in inflammation and identified the cause of a devastating auto-inflammatory disease. Again, just beautiful, detailed work on which I'm sure will be built translational research efforts that will be carried out in the months and years in the future. The third discovery is again a collaboration, and it's no coincidence there is a theme emerging here. Led by Mark van Delft and David Huang, Guillaume Lessine and Ben Kyle. Ben's now Dean of Medicine at the University of Adelaide. They're protein chemists and medicinal chemists and cell biologists working together to identify new molecules, precursors of new medicines that block cell death. And again, I'm so excited about the translational opportunities that this work provides, as well as excited about the insights the work has shown to the basic processes of life. I think that's a tremendous combination and one that excites me every day as I come into the Institute as Director. 2020, although not yet half over, is a year like few of us can remember. For my generation, it's been easy to be distracted by our avocado and goat cheese on toast and half skinny, half almond cappuccinos, and forget that for most of the Institute's 105-year history, the threat of epidemic and pandemic disease sweeping Melbourne was palpable. For me, it wasn't front of mind, and that's despite the fact that each day I enter the Institute, I walk through the corridor that leads from our entrance on Royal Parade through our east and central wings to our new west wing where my office is located. And I should have been reminded of that ever-present danger of pandemic disease. Along the wall of the corridor is a timeline that charts the diseases that have impacted the community over the last 105 years and highlights the research done by Institute scientists to better understand, diagnose, prevent and treat these diseases. From 1915, when the Institute was born, through the middle of the last century, many of the research highlights on that wall focus on infectious diseases that swept through our community with devastating effect. In the second half of the 20th century, under Macfarlane Burnett and then Gus Nossel's leadership, the Institute shifted its major focus to unravelling the mysteries of the immune system, how it recognises self and responds to infection, how it's controlled and how it can be harnessed. The discoveries made by Burnett and Nossel, by Mitchell and Miller, by Mackay and Whittingham, and by their successors in our immunology research teams today have very much provided the foundations on which the entire world is basing its response to the current coronavirus pandemic. WeHi is very much a microcosm of our community, and like the community, we've been impacted by the pandemic. Our researchers have had to down tools in many cases and work from home. And that's been a challenge for many people. Those of us that had caring responsibilities for children and have to homeschool them, I can think personally of no more greater nightmare than trying to homeschool my own two children. Thankfully, they're now 23 and 25. And those of us in our WeHi community who are overseas and separated from loved ones, these things create enormous anxiety, let alone the impact that COVID-19 has on the economic stability of households too. Here at WeHi, though, we're also a little bit different. We're an organisation that are not just impacted by COVID, but we can help the response to the crisis. Here at WeHi, we are leading on some projects and collaborating with a range of research partners on other projects. Researchers at the fabulous Doherty and Burnett Institutes here in Melbourne, at hospitals around Australia, and with organisations around the world, all aimed at mitigating the potentially devastating impact of the pandemic, organising clinical trials of existing medicines, improving diagnostics, investigating the virus, and working on new treatments. As always, I've been inspired by the commitment of our researchers and their willingness to collaborate both internally and externally. We are truly brighter together. You're going to hear from two of our researchers who are leading some of our COVID-19 work. But before they come to the stage, I want to thank a number of people. But perhaps they're not the people you might expect. COVID-19 is now affecting 213 countries. And as we have watched events unfold around the world, it's like seeing 213 experiments being done simultaneously. I'm so glad that I'm part of the Australian experiment. Last month, I was asked by a journalist, Raf Epstein, who hosts the Drive program on ABC Radio Melbourne, whether I had confidence in the system. It was a really interesting question, and my unhesitating answer, which came from my heart and my gut, was yes. But for the last month, I've been reflecting on why I felt that with such certainty. I think it was because all of our elected representatives, irrespective of where they lie on the political spectrum, were listening to the experts on this issue and had put aside political differences for the good of the nation, even those individuals who might have been unwilling to follow scientific advice on some issues in the past. Wow, that really feels good, and it's such a difference to how things are playing out elsewhere in the world. So I want to thank our political leaders for what has been remarkable leadership. I think also my sense of optimism came because of the quality of our chief medical officers and chief health officers and their amazing teams, federally, here in Victoria and in other states. At WeHi, we know these people. These are our colleagues and, like us, are passionate, driven and objective. Importantly, in a wonderfully open democracy like ours, with media able to air dissonant views, we have had a robust debate in which researchers and commentators have been able to question whether the current strategy is too fast or too slow. And I know that the public servants tasked with giving government advice have not simply stuck to their first thoughts, but have listened to those different voices and modified their approach. So I want to thank our public servants in health departments around the country for their remarkable work. Finally, I think I was optimistic because of what I know about our community, and the community I've got to know best is this community, our board, our staff, our students, our alumni, our collaborators and our supporters. Almost universally decent people who most importantly care about each other more than they care about themselves. I want to thank you all for the wonderful gift of optimism at such a time of great uncertainty. Before I close, I'd like to acknowledge the three wonderful board presidents with whom I've shared this stage over the past 12 years. Our current president, Jane Hemstrich, who took this position last year after a number of years on the board and has been a wonderful source of advice and leadership through these most difficult times. Jane, thank you. For 6 years until last year's AGM, our board president was Chris Thomas. Chris had a wealth of knowledge and experience and was instrumental in guiding the Institute through a number of key projects, as Jane has mentioned, including the monetisation of our royalty rights in venetoclax and the investment in constructing our early learning centre. I could not have asked for a better boss. Thank you, Chris. And before Chris, our board president was Leon Davis, who brought immense leadership experience for his time at several of Australia's largest companies, as well as his passionate advocacy for reconciliation, something that has changed us for the better. He oversaw the building and redevelopment project that was completed in 2012, a massive investment which 8 years later has reaped enormous returns for enhancing our research and very much allowing us to contribute to the effort to curtail the Covid-19 pandemic. Chris, Jane, Leon each bring and brought a different range of equally impressive experience to their time on the board, and each have enhanced the Institute in different ways. I've learnt a lot from working with them. Thank you to all 3 of you, and indeed to all our board members, past and present, for your passion and dedication to the Institute. I'll now ask Jane back to the stage, and we are happy to take questions.
Thank you, Doug. I'd now like to ask if Institute members have any questions for Doug or for me. Again, your questions can be submitted via Slido, and I'll give our members a moment to ask any questions. And just a reminder that any COVID-19 research questions will be held until after the scientific presentation from Mark Pellegrini and Wai Hong Tam, which is coming up next.
Oh, a question. This is good.
This is very exciting.
This is very exciting. This is the first for a number of years.
Was WeHi one of the medical research institutes that have received the government's JobKeeper support for eligible staff?
We believe we are eligible, and we have put an application in and are at the moment identifying eligible staff who may be supported through JobKeeper. So, and let me again thank federal government, particularly the Prime Minister, the Treasurer, Finance Minister and Minister Hunt, our Health Minister, for creating a scheme in which many medical research institutes may be supported. Keeping our remarkable research teams intact and associated with their workplace through these difficult times is something we appreciate enormously.
Right, there being no other questions, I'm going to invite Wai Hong to come and tell us all the details.
Good afternoon. And it's wonderful to be here and to have an opportunity to tell you about our work against COVID-19 using antibody-based therapies. And so antibodies are our immune system defense, and they can protect against COVID-19. So there's many ways that we can actually generate antibodies against COVID-19, and one of the most classic ways that you can think about that is through vaccination. And so we can vaccinate people against using recombinant antigens against the virus, and then our bodies would mount an immune response and generate antibodies that can then protect us against COVID-19. Another way of generating antibodies against COVID-19 is actually therapy that's been used over 100 years ago, and this is actually using convalescent plasma therapy. And what you can do is to actually get plasma from people who have recovered from COVID-19, and you can infuse them. And the main key component of plasma that actually can treat infectious diseases is actually the presence of antibodies. What we're trying to do here at WeHi is to actually generate therapeutic antibodies that can actually target the virus. And so this allows us to actually develop something that's very well characterized, something that's safe and highly potent against the virus, and to stop virus entry and infection. This is an image that's probably embedded in your minds at this point in the last 3 months. And what you see here is an amazing EM of coronavirus. And one of the most prominent features on the surface of the virus are these crown-like projections, or corona, from which the name coronavirus comes from. These projections are actually the presence of a protein on the virus, which is very interesting to us, and it's called the spike protein, and it's a protein that's labeled in red. And the reason why we're interested in spike proteins in terms of therapeutic antibody development is that this protein on the virus governs entry into our human cells. So we have here virus spike exists as a single protein, but on the surface of a protein, 3 virus spike proteins come together to form what we call a trimer. So what you see in terms of the top configuration is actually 3 molecules of spike coming together in the 3 different colors of purple, blue, and cyan. We can flip that top view into a side view, and so those are the projection that you see in terms of the trimer. And then also virus spike has many different conformations, and the last conformation there that's shown is what we call an open conformation. And what's fascinating about that open conformation is that it engages the human receptor called human ACE2. So we're interested in virus spike and human ACE2 because they are the lock and key interaction that allows the virus to enter cells. And so what virus spike does on the surface of the virion is to attach to human ACE2, initiate a process of membrane fusion, then allowing the virus to enter the cells, allowing it now to replicate and to make multiple copies of itself within our cells. So what we're going to do is we're going to develop antibodies that can actually block that interaction, we can block that attachment, and by blocking that attachment, we can block viral fusion and also then viral entry. We highlight Biologics Initiative was launched this year by myself and also my co-chair, Professor Ian Wicks. And the main tenet of the Biologics Initiative is to actually accelerate the development of antibody therapies against cancer, inflammatory diseases, and also, of course, against the global pandemic that we're seeing right now. And in terms of our efforts towards COVID-19, we're going to deploy 2 different antibody platforms. One is a human antibody platform, and the other one is an Alpaca antibody platform. In terms of human antibodies, we've partnered up with CSL, the 3rd largest global biotech company. CSL and WeHi have a long-standing partnership, and we have an established antibody discovery program. What we have access to are high diversity, high functionality, human antibody phage display library. And what that means is that we have an ability to screen 100 billion human antibodies that will target spike protein. And it's actually looking through that collection of human antibodies that we're going to find the ones that can actually block virus entry. And the reason why human antibodies are interesting in terms of therapeutic is that the pathway to clinic is well defined. They're safe and they can be extremely potent. And also, my pet love is obviously antibodies that come from Australian alpacas. Through evolution, alpacas, camels, and also some species of sharks have evolved an extremely special antibody, and they're called nanobodies. These are the smallest naturally occurring antibody binding domains. The reason why they're special is that they're small, they're extremely stable, and also extremely sticky to the target, and in this case, it's virus spike protein. And all of these properties come together to make an incredible design for inhaled biotherapies. And what that means is that we can deliver these Australian alpaca antibodies directly to the lung and therefore have a therapy against COVID-19. So we're excited. We've immunized these alpacas in Bairnsdale, and we're excited to see the special antibodies that they can develop against the virus. So our idea around antibody therapies is to be able to screen and then find through hundreds and billions of antibody molecules, either through alpacas or human antibody libraries with CSL, those select antibodies that can actually bind to spike, They'll bind to spike protein, but they'll also stop the engagement of spike with human ACE2. And there are these body of antibodies that we call neutralizing antibodies. Neutralizing antibodies will block the attachment, and by blocking attachment, we have no virus entry and therefore no COVID-19 infection. This is not the first time we've seen a coronavirus epidemic. In 2002, we saw SARS-1, and in 2012, we then also saw MERS. We know that these epidemics are coming and pandemics as well. And because coronaviruses are increasingly jumping from animals and humans as habitats become sparser and more endangered. So what we hope to build with these platforms and with our Biologics Initiative is a resilient future around our research efforts against future pandemics. So beyond trying to find antibodies against COVID-19, we are also seeking out antibodies around SARS and MERS and all the common beta coronaviruses. It has been an incredibly exciting 2 to 3 months, as Mark has mentioned. We have had an incredible support from the WeHi community, research community. Doesn't go beyond a day where I don't get a couple emails from people at WeHi who are offering their help, offering their scientific expertise. But in addition to something that Doug alluded to, our amazing precinct partners. We cannot have done this work, the amount of work that we've done in the last 2 months, without the ability to collaborate very freely with CSL, the Peter Doherty Institute, Burnett, and CSIRO. And we thank also the Australian Synchrotron and the Crystallization Centre to remain open and access in terms of our COVID-19 work. In the last 2 months, we've been busy making proteins. We've been trying to understand the structural biology of antibody binding molecules, but also we've had tremendous success in setting up assays, as Mark has mentioned, that will actually look for the best antibodies and the most potent antibodies to stop virus infection. And so I thank my partners on this journey. We also thank the incredible donors that continue to barrack for us as we go on this journey. This slide is already out of date. Up to date, we have more than over 740 COVID-19 donors. Thank you for funding our work and believing in us. We also have funding from the Hen Yi Group and also from Lady Primrose Potter. And we also thank the Victorian State Government and Australian Government for believing in our research and also helping us progress treatments towards COVID-19.
Well, thank you all for your virtual attendance this afternoon. And I hope that we'll meet soon in person. But until then, I send you all my warmest wishes and hope that you and your families are well and will continue to be safe and well. Thank you.